The feud between Liz Cheney and the Trumpers, it goes on. She, a congresswoman from Wyoming, a conservative, mind you, the number 3 ranked Republican in the House, and the daughter of Dick Cheney. All of that, though, not enough to prove her GOP bona fides to the people still worshiping at the altar of Trump. Now, that includes Donnie Jr. Take a look at this tweet. Trump's oldest son posting a picture of Cheney fist-bumping President Biden Wednesday night, calling her a warmonger and a Democrat. The rest of the tweet, frankly, too idiotic for me to even read. Now, Cheney, she's continuing to take the high road, tweeting this in response, saying she disagrees strongly with the president's policies, but she was being civil, respectful, and dignified. Cheney also wrote that they are not sworn enemies, they're all Americans. In the meantime, the rift in the GOP continues to widen. And it all played out this week at a Republican retreat in Orlando, where the Cold War between Cheney and the Republican House leader Kevin McCarthy started heating up. Politico closely followed the Orlando event, and I'm going to read now from a recent piece. Quote, McCarthy, when asked whether it's difficult to have harmony in his ranks when Cheney has been so vocal with her viewpoints on Donald Trump, he offered up some thinly veiled criticism. There's a responsibility. If you're going to be in leadership, leaders eat last. And when leaders try to go out and not work as one team, it creates difficulties, end quote. Cheney and McCarthy cannot agree on anything as it relates to Trump, including his role in the Capitol riot. Cheney wants a full investigation to get to the truth. I should tell you, the American public overwhelmingly want that as well. McCarthy, though, he wants to water it down by also including probes into things like Black Lives Matter protests and Antifa and whatever else to try to, well, make it anything but just about the riots. Now, you may remember that McCarthy initially denounced Trump for his role on January 6th. Then, however, he flew down to Mar-a-Lago soon after to take and dip the knee as he was asking Trump for both forgiveness here and a welcome back into his orbit. Now, earlier today, Andrew spoke with a Politico reporter who covers the White House and D.C., Daniel Lippman.
Daniel, let's start with that big Republican meeting in Orlando this week. The framing from the outside looking into the meeting was Trump versus non-Trump. Kevin McCarthy on the Trump side versus Liz Cheney on the non-Trump side. Before we get into their issues, does that framework even fit today's GOP? How big is the non-Trump portion of the Republican Party? Because most of the time it feels like we can name the members in Congress or like Liz Cheney's alone on an island.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the Trump wing of the party is still ascendant, even though Trump is no longer in office. Very few Republican members of Congress are willing to, stand up to the former president and say, let the party should go in a different direction because they don't want to get primaried. And also the grassroots energy is still pretty pro-Trump.
And we got further evidence of that during Wednesday's address by the president. Liz Cheney was in the crowd, and she's been getting blasted and had to tweet at defense after she gave a fist bump to President Biden as he entered the chamber for his address to Congress. This from the same Republican Party that's demanding that Biden work with them in a bipartisan fashion. Has it been lost? Did their posturing at all come up in this meeting, since they won't even allow their members to shake hands with a Democratic president?
It's kind of a sad state of affairs in the country when both parties can't even break bread or even just shake each other's hands, even during a pandemic. And so I think that will blow over. It's not a huge deal, but it's indicative of the angst in the party about they don't want Republicans to work with Biden. It's hard enough for them to come up with policy messages that work against this president. And I think they're kind of resistant to the idea that this is a president who Republicans should work with. They think that he is just spending way too much money that is going to lead to inflation that is ultimately going to hurt the economy.
And yet, despite all this, the Republicans in the House had a chance to depose Liz Cheney from leadership and decided not to. I don't understand how they're dealing with the split, or are they? What explains how they're handling or not handling this difference among them?
I think they're trying as hard as they can to have a big tent Republican Party, although there are issues in terms of actually accomplishing that goal. They don't want to drive out moderate suburban voters that might have voted for Biden last time. They hope that they can win those people back if it's a Ron DeSantis or a Nikki Haley or Tim Scott. And so I think the party elders, however little or much power they have, they recognize that it's good to have ideological diversity. And remember, Democrats used to hate Dick Cheney and anyone associated with him, and so it's pretty ironic that Liz Cheney is kind of a hero in some parts of the left.
From a purely cynical standpoint, Kevin McCarthy seems somewhat fitting as an avatar for the pro-Trump portion of the party because we know how he actually feels about Trump. He said to colleagues before Trump was elected that he thinks Trump is on Putin's payroll. We also heard McCarthy condemn Trump for the Capitol riot before he changed his tune in defense of Trump, more worried about future elections. Is that a fair summary of where the Republican Party is right now? That a lot of them know that Trump is damaging, potentially toxic to them in the party, but those worries are trumped, if you'll pardon the pun, because they fear they can't win elections without him?
I think that's a very fair assessment, that there is a concern in the party that you can't piss off the former president too much, because he could start a third party, or he could just endorse every primary challenger and lead to havoc in Republican circles. But if you talk to members of Congress on the Republican side, many of them will admit privately that Trump is not good for the party, and the party should update its brand and find new leaders instead of relying on someone who lost after one term.
I sense we may be seeing an example of that from McCarthy's and others' positions on the pro-Trump side, refusing to work out a Capitol riot commission like the 9/11 probe because the Republican Party insists that it also covers racial justice protests from last summer. Cheney has said that having a commission is essential so the mistakes of the riot are not repeated. Is this really about how the riot commission would make the party and Trump look? And I'm just wondering if that's problematic for the GOP, since so many Americans saw the riot with their own eyes. I'm not sure the wisdom of the GOP just sort of ignoring it or trying to ignore the riot.
Yeah, it's pretty befuddling to observers in Washington. And there's some question of whether we actually need such a commission, because we kind of know what happened. It's not like we're uncovering hidden tweets that were lost in the Amazon. This was something that Trump had talked about, how it was going to be wild, encouraging people to come down. But I think the Republican Party just wants to move on. They don't want to have to focus on this, regurgitating and reviewing what happened in the lead up to January 6th.
So I think there would be some value in coming up with some unified conclusion. I want to switch gears and ask you about President Biden. He just hit 100 days in office, and two things so far have stood out, at least to me, about how he's run his White House. There's been absolutely no leaking. And there's only been a couple of examples I can think of where the events of the day seemed to catch the Biden White House off guard or less prepared. We had the surge at the border and refugee limits, the caps, both of which it seemed to take the administration a couple of days to iron out and correct. You've written about the Biden team and how they work. Compare the Biden White House to others just on how they function and operate, and then give me your 2 cents on why the Biden White House appears to be running so well comparatively.
Well, the way that it works is that basically everyone has known each other for a long time. They get along, and they don't have these huge internal power struggles where they're trying to knife each other in the back, or trying to oust each other from power and gain an advantage. And so they're all secure in their relationships with the president. And so it's a seamless kind of working order. They, of course, they debate policy, how to address crises, but this, Ron Klain is, widely admired by his White House colleagues. They think that he listens to what they want to do, and he, decisions are clearly made and explained why they were made. And I guess the 2 cents about why it seems to be kind of this way is that other White Houses, with the Obama administration and the Trump administration, these were people who mostly had not worked in the White House before, and sometimes were new to politics. And so, of course, there was going to be more leaking and more internal infighting. Here, these are all veterans, many of them who served in the Obama administration as well.
And quite a contrast from the Hunger Games example of the last 4 years coming out of the White House. Daniel Lippman is a reporter covering the White House and Washington for Politico. Daniel, thanks for the time and the insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And up next, this day in history, 10 years ago to the day, President Obama, he had a little fun at the podium. He made a laughing stock of Donald Trump. Remember, he, the guy who started the whole birther campaign about the then president. And it all happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I'm going to show you what Obama said then and also explain the fascinating backstory to that evening.